All right, we're back into it. Welcome to another video. This one, as you would have seen, is about don't touch the stash. Now, what does that actually mean? Right now, it's the 19th of January 2024, and it's the peak of summer here in New Zealand. And essentially, what don't touch the stash is all about is working out how much feed we can actively feed between now and the end of the lactation without compromising our winter feeding period. Now, it seems so crazy to think June, July, August, September already, but that gives us the absolute confidence to know we can feed 3 kilos, 4 kilos, 5 kilos a day, whatever the number is for your farm going forward for the rest of the season. So I've set up a bit of a base template here that I'm going to record on the iPad to show you and walk you step by step through it. So let's get into it. One of the key parts of the calculation that I'm about to show, there's a big assumption in the background regarding the changes in demand. And now for this particular example, I've used a static demand. The demand for the cows is going to stay the same. And the reason why I bring up balance state, which you'll see shortly as well, is that is when most farms have typically run out of their supplement reserves if they are more of a grass-based system, or if they've got in-shed feed that's typically carrying on anyway. But the likes of bales of silage or bulk silage, hay, they've all been used up by balance state because that's when we're relying on that spring growth to kick in. So let's get this iPad up here on the screen with you as well. So the base farm here is going to be 510 cows and 170 hectares. So first things first, which we've worked this out historically before now, is we'll just do the stock in it, which is 3 cows per hectare. I did already know that. I didn't need the calculator though, because fortunately in this job you see the same numbers start coming through and then you do start remembering them. So what do we need to leave for winter? This was what I briefly talked on before. So we've got what do we need to leave for winter is obviously the feed, the supplement feed that we're going to allow for. But what do we need to consider is we've got dry cows, we've got milking cows, we've got to consider balance state between when winter starts and when we're sort of going to exceed, pasture growth is going to exceed demand. That's a very important date in terms of when supplements need to get us to. Growth rates obviously, and then a wastage factor. So I'll briefly touch on that wastage factor later, but essentially the short of whatever the number comes to in terms of what the cows need, we need to apply a wastage factor to that as well, and then add more supplements so that the cows are genuinely going to get what they need. So we are going to use round numbers, and for this particular example, as I briefly mentioned before, we're shortening the example up just to keep it a little bit more basic for this first particular example. So using round numbers from the 1st of June to the 15th of July, that is 45 days. I've said the 15th of July, we're based here, Te Awamutu in the Waikato, and the 15th of July is a very common calving date. We're also going to assume that the pasture growth over that 45-day average is going to remain at 20 kgs of dry matter, and so that is that's another assumption for this element of simplicity for this calculation. So we need to work out what our total demand is to match our supply. And so for this particular instance, if we're using 20 kgs of dry matter per hectare per day, and we've got a stocking rate of 3 cows per hectare, that means for our pasture cover to be neutral over that whole 45-day window, which is very unlikely to happen, but it's important to understand what that number needs to be to ensure you're not going backwards in pasture cover, or you're not actually gaining too much pasture cover, because as crazy as it sounds, having too much grass in winter is also a bad thing. It is a balance. You've got to be within that right window. So for those numbers to match, our demand per cow per day needs to be 6.67 kgs of dry matter. So it's a little bit of an ugly number to use, but we're just going to run with it for the time being. So we're going to use 11 kgs of dry matter in this particular example. So that will account for maintenance activity, still growing the calf, and weight gain. So that's what that 11 kgs are going to account for. So we have a supplement requirement of 4.4 kgs for this example. So I've just rounded the 6.67 down to 6.6. So we've got 4.4 kgs of dry matter that has to come from supplement. So if we do the maths over that window, 510 cows times 4.4 kgs of dry matter per cow per day, that is a supplement quantity, because this whole equation is working out the supplement that we have to leave in the don't touch the stash, times our 45 days is essentially 101 tonne of dry matter. So that's that number there. And then because there's going to be an element of wastage, if we divide that number by 0.9, so 90%, that gives us this 112 tonne of dry matter required for those 45 days. Now, I'm well aware that there's going to be supplement required beyond the start of calving, but that's just me trying to keep this nice and simple and easy to follow at this point in time. So the next question that follows on from that is, well, what are our current supplement inventories? What do you have on hand as of today? So in this particular example, I've just made it that we've got 100 tonne of dry matter of meal for the cow shed, we've got 200 tonne of maize silage, and then 100 tonne of grass silage. So some of that maize is already there, and some is still to come in this coming season. So we've got 400 tonne of dry matter total that is going to be on hand as of, you might as well say, the best part of 5 to 6 weeks time from now. We'll have that on hand. The meal and the grass silage will be continuing to reduce for that time being, but as we sit here today, those are the numbers we're working off. So there's about 120 days left in the milking season. Now this video is meant to be recorded on the 14th, it's now the 19th, so it's plus or minus depending on when that dry off piece is going to be. So if we've got 400 tonne of dry matter total, we need 112 for an absolute minimum of winter in this example, which is only getting us to the 15th of July. That means we have 288 tonne of dry matter that is available to be fed between now and dry off to ensure we have left enough behind. So that over 120 days is 2.4 tonne of dry matter, which is this number here. And then converting back to kgs of dry matter, just so we can get to a per cow basis, over our 510 cows gives us 4.7 kgs of dry matter per cow per day available in those 3 different supplement sources to get us to dry off. So you might think, yep, that sounds good, 5 kilos a day. It's late January at the moment, we're feeding 2 kilos, we've got 3 kilos left in the budget. Happy days. But how does that actually stack up? So now I've just put some very rough growth rates for pasture over these next few months. Last season definitely didn't look like this, was a lot better. However, the season before was a lot lower. Like to grow February and to grow 20 through February, I would consider that to be slightly on the optimistic side of a bad summer, but 20 for a stock standard Waikato summer, we should still be able to achieve that. 30 for March, 40 for April, and 35 for May. So those months there average 31 kgs of dry matter. That's just the summation of those months divided by 4, because there's 4 months that are in the subject here. So if we take into account what a typical cow's intake over that time is going to be, we're going to use 17 kilos as an average over that 4-month period. That means that and we've got 4.7 kgs of dry matter, so that has come from there. So we've got 4.7 kgs of supplement, dry matter kgs of supplement that we can offer per cow per day through that window without compromising our winter stash. That means we've got 12.3 kgs of dry matter that has to come from pasture. So that's just the total intake minus the supplement gives us the amount required from pasture, and that's per cow per day. And then if we times that by our stocking rate at 3 cows, that gives us a demand of 37 kgs of dry matter. So if we've got a demand of 37 and our average growth over that window is 31, we're at a deficit of 6 kgs of dry matter per hectare per day over that 4-month period. So what's quite quickly gone from having 4.7, you might as well say 5 kilos dry matter per cow per day of supplement to offer, we are still in a deficit of where we need to be finishing. And so where do you sit on that? Where do your numbers stack up? There's obviously options regarding more purchase feed, reduced intakes, which don't encourage that obviously. Culling stock, you're going to have your PD tests coming up sometime in the next few weeks, so there's going to be information coming out of that you can extract and be able to potentially reduce your demand that way. Or just earlier dry-offs. So these numbers were done to the 20th of May, but maybe that means it's the 5th of May or the 1st of May. How do those numbers stack up for you? There's quite a bit at play there to follow those all those numbers through. Like I say, I think we should do a more detailed version of how those demand aspects change. Obviously, July as you've got cows calving and their intakes ramping up. August and September can be very slow months pasture growth wise as well. And so although this is only an example, you can quickly see how the pasture cover on farm and your targets to start the new season become very compromised. Now, last season everyone carried, last season being 31st of May 2023, a lot of people carried a huge amount of inventory into the winter period, which was great. However, the season before we learned very quickly the other way, that it was so dry and so slow growing that people used up their winter stash in the lactation season. And so it's obviously never advised or encouraged to be trying to buy supplement, and particularly grass silage and bales or hay on the spot market, because you're going to be paying a lot more for it. It's the basics of supply and demand 101 kick into gear. If it is bone dry and you need a silage bale, you're going to be paying $140, $150 per bale. That's likely delivered on farm, which is the best part of 75 cents per kilo of dry matter, versus making these planning decisions nice and early in the season and looking at your farm as an annual view. That is something that we do when we bring on new customers, is that anytime we are putting together a feed budget, an annual plan for a customer, we do a 12-month feed budget. Where are the stress points in the farming system? How can we put supplement in and around that? And then what times of year do we need to be contracting those supplements to get the best out of it and make sure that we're not paying through the roof on those prices. So that's a little bit about that. Hopefully that provides some value. We will do a more detailed breakdown and ensure that that makes more sense for you going forward. Thanks for following, like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.